I'm happy to welcome you to Prime Time for Women's weekly Women, Wine, and Financial Freedom. Tonight, it's my special pleasure to have Lisa Baker Hinton, who, in full disclosure, is my niece, and also Karen Coyne. She is the founder of Clarity Planning, and which is part of Raymond James. So they are both experts in their fields, and tonight they will guide us as we explore important questions about finance, and also explore some delicious Maryland wines. Mm-hmm. So before we get started, I wanted to give Patricia and Cynthia a chance to say where they're from, if they care to do that, and be part of the conversation. So Patricia or Cynthia, do you want to join in and tell us where you're coming in from?
Okay, when you say coming in from, I'm not.
Where do you live, Patricia?
Oh, okay, I'm in the South suburban area. And I came upon you guys' website. You guys had a book club.
Yes.
And so I participated in that, and I just wanted to kind of, get a better feel for the organization, because I'm thinking about becoming a part of it. So I thought I'd join in with another event that you guys are having.
That's great. And all of our stuff is up on our website now. We finally, you can see all of our past guests. So thanks for joining, Patricia, and we're so glad you're here. Cynthia, do you want to join in and say where you're from? Okay. Sometimes people have to go away from their speakers, so that's fine too. So anyhow, for Patricia and Lisa and Karen and Cynthia and those who join us later, Prime Time for Women is really all about connecting and how we are stronger, happier, and healthier when we are seen and heard and when we're known. So because I want our guests to feel that way, I thought before I'd formally introduce both of you, if you're game, I'd like to ask each of you a couple little short answer questions and give you a chance to maybe connect with our attendees and tell a little bit about yourself. So are you game?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so this is for both of you. If what are the 3 words you would use to describe yourself today? And I know those 3 words can change at any different time, but what's going on in your life today? 3 words that best describe you. How about you, Lisa?
I would say independent, busy, and nurturing.
Good. Yay.
All over the place.
And that's a busy mother right there.
Yes.
Okay, Karen, how about you?
Let's see. I would say fresh, bold, and a connector.
Yeah, I think you are a connector. In case you don't know, Karen is the host of a wonderful podcast called Fresh Off the Vine, and I hope we get to talk a little bit about that later. Oh. Okay, so the next one I was going to ask you, and Karen, we'll start with you this time. What is your favorite song?
Oh my gosh, I never left the 80s, so a lot of my favorite songs are from the 80s, but lately I've been on a bit of a country COVID soundtrack, so I would say like Chris Stapleton I've been listening to. I love music, everything.
Okay, how about you, Lisa? Do you have a favorite song?
I don't know if probably Semi-Charmed Life, which is like a 90s rock song, which is hysterical that's like the first thing that came to mind. But whenever I'm working out in the cellar and I just kind of like need music that's just easy to listen to and fun, but like still upbeat, I always just go for 90s rock.
Oh, that's great. Okay, and one last question, and this might take a little bit more thought, but what is one important lesson that you learned as a little girl that still informs your life right now? And the reason we're asking that is because Prime Time for Women, we're doing a fair amount of research about how we tap into the strengths that we had as young girls and how those same strengths play out if we give them permission at every stage of life, and how they inform this stage, the prime time of life. So Lisa? What's something you learned as a little girl that you're still using today?
I think problem solving, that's like the first thing that came to mind, is that when I was younger, I can remember, I don't know, just growing up with my siblings and cousins and, you know, getting into all sorts of fun adventures and just problem solving. And that's something that's really stuck with me, whether it's career wise or family wise or relationships, whatever it is, has really stuck with me.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
How about you, Karen?
For me, it was financial independence, actually. I knew from an early age that I did not want to depend on someone else for, you know, basic needs. And I knew this at an early age. I was thinking about this recently when I was giving another talk, and we were talking about the money mindset. And I was asking the women in the group to think about some of their earliest memories around and experiences around money. And I was thinking about a particular Christmas when I really, do you remember the JCPenney catalog?
Yeah.
So I had that thing memorized inside and out, and there were a pair of roller skates that I really wanted for Christmas. And there were 3 tiers of roller skates. The least expensive one were like the strap contraption, and then there was the boot, the classic white boot. And then there was like the luxury white boot that had the crisscross metal hooks at the top and the toe stopper, and I wanted those. And I begged my parents for those, even though I knew they really just wanted to spend, they didn't want to spend that much money. So long story short, they ended up getting me the really nice boots, which made me feel like a heel and a spoiled brat, and made me feel like I did not enjoy getting that gift at all. And yeah, it just wasn't a good feeling, because I knew they had spent more than they really needed to, because I was being a bratty just brat. And so I didn't realize at the time how that experience kind of impacted me, but I knew that I did not want to rely on someone else for, you know, whether it was basic needs or roller skates. I was going to do it myself. And as soon as I could get a job, that's exactly what I did.
So that's a great story, because I think sometimes what is a yucky experience can also be a chance to launch us into new areas of growth and new independence. So thank you for sharing that, both of you. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started with tonight's program. Thanks for playing our little game. Lisa is the winemaker at Old Westminster Winery. It is in Carroll County, Maryland. And Lisa, the winery's been open how long?
So we started in 2009, but we didn't open the tasting room until 2015.
Okay. And you have now an event center where people can rent. And do you have any pictures that you have? No. Okay.
No, I didn't put together a presentation. Like typically,
okay, that's
like
fine. It's
share
not
our story.
Yeah, but what we can do is I'll put your contact information and the website in the chat.
Right.
So if people want to reach out, they can do that.
Yeah, that would be great.
It is a beautiful space, and if you get a chance to see it, it's not that far from where I am in Hagerstown, Maryland, so give it a shot. Okay, Lisa, so tell us a little bit about your tasting room and your passion for winemaking. How many kinds of grapes you grow, all that kind of good stuff.
Sure, I'll start with a little bit of background, like you just kind of mentioned when we got started. So Old Westminster is run on our family farm that I grew up on. It's my brother, sister, and I who now run it on a daily basis. We planted our first vines. It was kind of this like wild dream that we had in 2009. All 3 of us were still in college. My parents were thinking about selling our family farm, and we just really wanted to create an agricultural product that we could build a community around. We started doing a bunch of research and realized that growing grapes was a really viable option for us. We kind of, we were all in college for different things. It was what we had passions for, but all very different, and never had any idea that we were going to go into business together. So my brother, Drew, he's 17 months older than me, was business. I was a chemist. And then my younger sister, who's 17 months younger than me, was in marketing. And so when we started talking about launching Old Westminster Winery, it was something that really naturally fell into what we were good at and what we had passions for already. So it was just really reaffirmed from the beginning. So so that was in 2009 when we started kind of tossing around the idea. And then in 2011, which was my senior year of college, we decided to plant the vineyard and put up the winery. So we started by planting about 10 acres in Westminster, Maryland, like Debbie just said. And we also built the production facility the same year. So about 50% of our grapes that we make wine from are grown on our home vineyard. The other 50% are from other growers in Maryland. That's something that we find super important. We have built our business on agriculture. This is not, we're not buying grapes from elsewhere, bringing them in, making them. It's something that it is a very much a being a good steward of our land situation.
And you also use Maryland grapes, right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly. And so back in 2011, when we started Old Westminster, it was kind of this like crazy, audacious vision that we had to put Maryland wine on the map. And we had like kind of this crazy idea of how we were going to do that through distribution, through opening up the tasting room, and really just like creating a community driven brand. So one thing that Old Westminster is really good at is employing people and giving job opportunities, which we're really proud of. We have about 17 full-time staff that work at the winery every day. And then we have about 40 part-time staff who are working either doing deliveries, which we actually added on when COVID started in order to keep people employed. And then also in the tasting room on weekends. So the tasting room is what Debbie had mentioned earlier, which is the building on our farm where people can come to on the weekends, taste some of the wines, and just get like a farm experience that is just rooted in Maryland agriculture. Recently, this past year, we added our little pizza kitchen, which we call Eat Pizza Together. And that is made from all Maryland food. So the grain is grown and milled from Maryland wheat. All of the pepperonis are grown on Burnt Hill, which are our other farm. We also farm pigs and bees. So we're kind of, we're really just about supporting other farmers in the area. And it's just been like a really, really fun adventure that we've been on the past couple of years.
And let me ask you this, Lisa. How many tons of grapes do you harvest each year?
About 250,000.
250,000 tons?
Yeah.
That's a lot of grapes.
That's a lot of grapes. Yes, I get sick of them.
Yeah. And what kind of wines do you make? What kind of grapes are you growing?
So on our family farm in Westminster, we have predominantly planted Albarino, which is a grape variety that's native to Riaspicious, Spain. It makes like really fresh, crisp, acidic white wines. We also have Chardonnay and Muscat, which is like a really aromatic variety. And then we also have Cabernet Franc is our predominant red, and some Syrah. And then we also have another farm, which is a more recent, we acquired in 2016, and we farm that hillside biodynamically. So essentially no chemical inputs. And that one is 117 acres, and we have a number of different varieties there.
That's great. So what's going on at the farm this time of year? So
yeah, we're gearing up to go into like our pretty busy season at the farm on the weekends. So we have so we're open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. On those days, we have anywhere from like 300 to 500 people a day come through the farm. So that's really like our busy season actually on location. Coming out of like the fall and winter is particularly my busy season because I do all of the production. So when it's a little bit colder out, we try to knock out a lot of the tasks that we can do while we're not as busy elsewhere on the farm. Okay. One thing that recently has really like launched us into attaining kind of like our vision for putting Maryland on the map is that we are the 2021 Whole Foods Rosé of nationally. So all of their stores have to carry our rosé, which is just like an amazing, I know it was huge. It was huge for us.
You won some recognition at this year Maryland's Governor Cup too, didn't you?
I don't think so. We don't enter our wines there anymore.
I thought I saw. Yeah. Okay.
Probably not. It's been years since we've done the competitions, but yeah, I mean, you're
national now.
No, I don't mean it like that. But that's just something that's been like a really, really fun new aspect is the distribution, which in the past like 2 years has really taken another step.
I still remember the first time I went to the wine kitchen in Frederick, and I was sitting there, and they brought me out the wine menu, and it had a wine by Old Westminster Winery. I'm like, that's my niece and my nephew. So anyhow, that was very exciting. Well, Lisa, I was going to ask you if you could share a wine recommendation from Old Westminster Winery, something that's really tickling your fancy these days.
Sure. Yeah, we have a new release that's coming out. It's the 2020 Albarino. Albarino, it's grown on our home vineyard, makes a really fresh, white, crisp, really easy summer drinking. And it's what I'm loving right now. It's also a variety that doesn't have like an insane amount of recognition, but I just think has like a lot to offer. So that's my favorite.
All right. Well, when COVID's over, we're all going to take a field trip out to Old Westminster Winery. Right, Karen?
I'm sold, and I love Albarino. So
good.
Yeah.
Lisa, Karen's podcast is called Fresh Off the Vine, and Karen, this might be a great time to say how you intersect finance and wine together.
Yeah, well, it is a great segue. Fresh Off the Vine was created because I'm a financial advisor, but I see that money doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's like a vine that weaves and vines through all these different aspects of our lives. It affects our careers, our relationships, our health. And at the same time, kind of like, wine that's bottled up, a lot of us grow up and we're told that it's not polite to talk about money. You don't talk about it. And so you don't talk about it and you don't learn how to talk about it. Then you end up married and you're supposed to talk about it because that's something that couples argue about, but you don't know how because you never did. And so, my thought was, let's open it up. Let's open it up like we would a bottle of wine and just have some of these conversations and open up the issues, and we'll all get better with time. So, so it's sometimes about money, sometimes about wine, but always about getting better with time.
Yeah,
I love that.
I love that tagline in your podcast. I think that's great.
Yeah, that is great.
Karen, we'll have to make sure that we add that into the chat.
Sure thing.
Definitely.
Okay, so Lisa, I know that you have two little ones.
Did you just hear my mom is here watching did you just hear her knock?
No, I didn't, but I know that. So I was going to check in with Patricia and Cynthia and Karen to see if they had any questions. Typically, some people can stay, but when they're doing this, but I know that that's not your situation. So yeah, so if you have a question for Lisa about Old Westminster Winery, feel free to ask her now, or you can put it in the chat and I'll send them to her.
Or you can always email me too. Did you put my contact information in?
Here, give it to me right now. I'll type it in.
It's just lisa@oldwestminster.com.
I'm sold. I'll be coming to road trip. I'll be coming to see you real soon. It sounds wonderful.
Awesome. We'd love to have you. Shoot me an email before you come. We'd love to meet you.
Okay. Awesome.
All righty. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. Take care. So now this is the part of tonight's program where I get to tell you a little bit about Karen. She is the founder of Clarity Planning, an independent wealth management practice at Raymond James. And she is the host of a podcast, which we just talked about. She's also an author. One of the things Karen is also really good at, she said in the beginning, she's a connector. She serves our community in many ways with her financial knowledge and advocating for women's issues. So I wanted to make sure I thanked you for that, Karen. And tonight you are going to be speaking about this idea that there are attributes of successful financial clients. And I wanted to ask you, how did you come up with that topic? Why is it important for us to know that?
Yes, great question. So, I give talks. I'm asked regularly to speak to different groups and a number of women's groups, and especially this month, like you, with it being Women's History Month. And so I think actually it may have been when you and I spoke several months back and you asked if I would consider speaking. And I thought, I don't want to talk about just investments. it's very difficult to give general investment advice because it's so personalized.
Right.
So I don't like to go down that road. And you can find generic, general financial information anywhere. So I just started to think about some of the conversations I've had, for example, on the podcast. And one of my favorite podcast episodes was one that I recorded last fall with two fellow advisors, Sarah Boston and Melissa Joy. And we recorded it for Melissa's podcast called 52 Pearls, which we just cross-referenced on my podcast, Fresh Off the Vine. And I had actually suggested the topic, which was attributes of successful clients. And so we had this conversation, and it was basically about, what I've observed, not necessarily what I've, accomplished by myself, but what I've observed in working with many different clients over the 20 years that I've been in business. And especially in the recent past, I guess, past several years, I've really started to pay attention to what are those common denominators that lead to these positive outcomes. And so when I say successful clients, I don't necessarily mean the ones with the biggest gobs of money, but I mean, they have a stated goal and they are able to have a positive outcome in support of these stated goals. That to me is what defines success.
Yeah, but I was going to say one of the things that I really like about the way you conduct your business is you are really dedicated and focused on supporting people in their financial goals without losing sight of the other things that are important in their lives. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for recognizing that. I do, because it's kind of going back to what we were just talking about with Fresh Off the Vine, is that for me, I really want my clients to, some clients are very phobic. I've worked with clients who started out and money was just this awful, terrible word, and they didn't want to think about it, deal with it. It's just, as you know, it's very difficult for a lot of people to have certain conversations. For some people, it might be around aging. For other people, it might be sex, relationships. And for some people, it's money or all the above. So, for me, I see it as, okay, it's not just about working with a financial advisor isn't just about, let's try to make the most money. That's not what it's about. And sometimes I think there's this perception of financial advisors and it's, choosing what's the hottest stock, what should I invest in? And actually, for me, that's not how I run my business at all. Like you said, for me, it's about, I want to help my clients see how money fits into their life and how it best serves what's most important to them. Because ultimately you save and invest, but what for? What's the money for? It's so you can live your life and hopefully balance having some freedom and choices, whether it's today or down the road, and you can support your family and be prepared for emergencies, be prepared for a rainy day. There are many different reasons why you want to be financially prepared, but usually the reason is not just so you can make the most money possible. It's usually tied to some type of personal objective.
Right, and I think that your personal story, and maybe we can share it just a little bit about when your dad died, how that really formed a framework for you in realizing at a young age that there needs to be a strategy, right? Mm-hmm. I think part of the reason we're doing Women, Wine, and Financial Freedom, honestly, is when we did some national marketing research. One of the things that women want to talk about but don't talk about is money. And I think there is a little sense of, especially for women in their prime, oh my God, how did I get to this age and not know this? And so there's a little bit of a sense of embarrassment, like, shouldn't I know this? But if you've been so invested in your family or in a career or in, you divvied up things with your spouse and your spouse did the money or whatever, there should be some sort of a blessing or, some sort of
right, like grandfathering, like your grandfather.
Yeah, I can't think of the right word. I'm thinking absolution that you.
Yes, I know what you mean.
It's some sort of absolution that it's okay to say, I don't know this, but it doesn't mean you can't learn it.
Yes,
Bernadette. We're reaching out to people like Karen, who's an expert in this.
Yes, no, but you nailed it. You totally nailed it. I love everything that you just said, and it's getting it out there and saying, you know what, I don't know maybe as much as I want to about my financial situation, but that's changing today. And for me, it's even one tiny step in the right direction is progress. And that's what I want to see, you know, for my clients, the women that I'm, you know, that I speak to, the women that are joining us tonight.
You don't work just with women though, right?
No, no, yes,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but you know, as women in the business, we often are working with other women or asked to speak to groups like yours. And yeah, I talked about this with another group earlier this month. I think part of it is generational as well, right? I mean, you and I are from a different generation from these girls that are in their
And I'm in a different generation than you.
yeah, and I mean, we didn't have TikTok, and we didn't have Google, and we didn't have Instagram, and all these sources where we could go to and get lots of information very easily, get ideas, kind of brainstorm, maybe ask questions on Google that we were too embarrassed to ask someone. We didn't have all that. And at the same time, a certain generation was told, oh, honey, don't worry about that. I will take care of you. You know, and that's where I think your absolution was coming from, is for a certain generation, that was the mentality. It's like, you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to take care of that for you.
Right.
So I agree with you, though. It's okay to say, you know what, that's where I was, and that's the framework that I started out in. But now I realize I want to know more about this. I want to be prepared.
Yeah, and I was just because I referenced your early your early life lesson in this, I just was going to give you a chance to share that, and then we can get into those attributes that make a successful client.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in a family, there were 3 siblings, my parents, and then 3 children. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she's Korean. So she had very kind of limited interactions outside the house. She didn't work, she stayed home. And because of the language barrier, she just really didn't do a lot. She wasn't super social. She wasn't, like I said, she didn't work. So my dad was the main breadwinner and the point person on all the financial affairs. He died suddenly in a car accident when he was 40 years old. I was 15 at the time. I'm the oldest of 3. And, you know, obviously when you lose someone, especially a parent, when you're a child, it's devastating. But even at that age, I recognized that if my parents had not done a basic level of planning, we would have been destitute. And just the fact that he had done a little bit of planning and prepared for that catastrophic type situation saved us, because I know my mother could not have provided for, she just didn't have the skills, she didn't have the language, she didn't have the network, it would have been very, very difficult. And I look back on that and sometimes I think, you know, it's not unlikely that I would have had to have dropped out of school and my life would have had a totally different trajectory, a totally different story. So there were a couple things I realized. One was that even a basic level of financial planning can be truly invaluable to help protect you and your family. The other thing, though, that I recognized at the time was that my mom had no clue where to begin, what to do, and you know, and this was in large part because my father had handled all of the affairs. And the other part of that was that when you're grieving, as you know, there's so much happening to your body and your brain, chemically, physiologically. I mean, there's hormones and neurochemicals that are flooding the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of your brain that controls memory and learning. And it's so overwhelmed, it's basically barely functioning. It's hard enough to get out of bed on most days, let alone filter through endless decision trees and making complicated, you know, decisions that require complex consideration and thought. So I realized that, you know, she didn't have a network, she didn't have a team, she didn't have someone she could say, hey, Bernadette, I got all these papers. What do I actually need to do with these? Do I need to return these right now? Can this wait until later? What should I do this? Should I select option A, B, or C? She didn't have that. And, you know, part of that was because my parents didn't have a lot of money, so they didn't have a team. They were able to manage their affairs on their own. But it did open my eyes to the fact that not only is it important to be involved in the financial affairs, but having a team in place before you need it is also incredibly valuable, because if at some point in our lives, we're all going to have some major type of transition event, whether it's retirement, an unexpected death, a health event, selling a business maybe. And those are all events that take a lot of energy at a time where we also, it's a highly emotional time, but where we also have to make big financial decisions. And if we haven't already built up the kind of the muscle and the language and the framework, and we feel comfortable and confident in our decision making, it's a difficult combination.
So I love that you're also talking about the importance of connection, because that's sort of the underpinning of prime time for women, is that not only physical health, but emotional health and spiritual well-being are based on the number of connections. And there's a really interesting research article that came out recently that was like longevity, that social connections play a greater role in longevity and emotional well-being than diet and exercise combined. So it's sort of like that was sort of like one of the things that has really validated our efforts to connect women, this idea that we can improve our understanding and explore new things like financial planning, but also it makes us stronger, it helps us live longer, decreases our risk for lots of disease. So in your financial planning, you're not only helping people financially, your approach to it is supporting their well-being. And so I just say congratulations to you.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about what makes a successful client.
So this is where we get into some of the attributes. I think that one of the things that I find really fascinating is that you don't have to have a formal education in economics, accounting, any of that, in order to be a good steward of your assets. In fact, I know people who probably know too much for their own good. And that can lead to really either maybe too risky decision making. It can lead to analysis paralysis on the other hand. And so I would say the one overarching theme is that it's not about what you know, but it's about how you behave and the types of decisions that you make. And the bottom line, that you're not allowing your emotions to make the decisions for you at a time when your emotions can really hijack your decision making. So for example, last year, I think it was like last year to this day is when we saw the markets drop about 33%. If you were feeling nervous, that of course is normal. If you're watching your 401k statement or your IRA statement, you're going, oh my gosh, we're down 33% in one day. At this rate, we're going to be out of money in 3 days. It's very easy to let your emotions take control. And what we see is for those people who let their emotions drive the ship, those may have been the people out there who called Vanguard or 1-800, wherever they have their accounts and said, cash me out, take me out. I don't want to lose all my money in 3 days. Whereas the clients that are, recognize that, okay, that's an emotional response, but that's not the best response. They're a little removed from that and they're able to separate that and say, you know what, no, I don't really like this either, but I understand how investments work. I'm diversified. This is a bump in the road. And, I have a plan and I'm going to stick to it. So.
Yeah, so that sort of reminds me of just how life is in general. I mean, we all experience traumas. I don't think anybody gets through life without having some sort of trauma or tragedy. And I think it's not, to me, it's how you respond to that will help you be resilient, or you will feel overwhelmed. And so it's interesting that same thing can apply in financial matters to help be a successful client, that's one of the attributes.
Yes. Definitely.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Another one is what I call being in action, being actionable, being decisive. Kind of going back to maybe a little bit related to what you were just talking about. If someone has had trauma or they're just generally very fearful it may be very difficult for them to make a decision for fear of, am I doing the right thing? Is this, you know, the overwhelming anxiety of, you know, being able to make a decision. Whereas successful clients recognize that you're never going to know everything. It's just impossible. You could be a professional. You could have a research team of your own doing research around the clock 24/7. It doesn't mean that you have all the answers or you know exactly how the world is going to play out in the coming weeks, months, and years. So successful advisors have a way of recognizing that, look, I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to look at some options. I'm going to talk to my advisor about the best recommendations for my situation. And then of those top recommendations, I'm going to make a decision. And what I love is when I meet with a client, we have conversation, we collaborate, we talk about, you know, okay, you said you needed this, here's what I recommend. And then boom, you know, it might not necessarily even be at that meeting, but within a matter of days, weeks, they followed up and said, okay, you know, we have these follow-up questions, we address them, and then they move on to make a decision, as opposed to the ones that cannot close a loop and just, whether it's analysis paralysis, I think that can be part of it. Or again, if it's fear-based, if it's, I don't know if I have the confidence to, you know, is this the right decision? What about the election? What about the economy? What about inflation? What about Russia, Korea, whatever, right? The successful clients have a way of filtering out that noise and saying, I have this information that I have right now to make the best decision that I can right now. And then they move forward confidently.
So that's sort of like mindset, you know, this idea that once you make a decision, are you able to be in the present, make the decision, live that fully, and then move on to the next moment, as opposed to keep being in that Groundhog Day where you go back and revisit and revisit and revisit, and just like you're spinning, you're like a hamster on a wheel.
Yes. And then the opposite of the successful client is the one that falls into the avoidance death trap. What I think of as, like, I always think about Yoda saying, what was it? Fear leads to hate, hate leads to, or fear leads to hate, hate leads to anger, anger leads to, so it's unhappiness, something, I'm totally botching it, but it's very, very similar. And it's like, if you're avoiding something, whether it's having a conversation, a tough conversation with an employee, your boss, your spouse, your kids, whether it's dealing with your money, generally, whenever we avoid something, we might feel better temporarily because we don't have the stress of dealing with it, but underneath the surface, it's actually getting worse. And our stress builds and the situation may build and get worse. And then as the situation gets worse, it gets harder and harder to deal with. So you just kick it down the road even more. And then you get to a point where you feel so much shame that you can't or don't want to talk about it. And that's what I call the death spiral of avoidance, where it just leads to a place that's so icky and you feel so much shame because you know that you should have taken action and you didn't, and now you feel awful. I've had a couple clients I've worked with that have pulled themselves out of that. And share.
Sorry.
Yep.
My daughter-in-law's calling me. I'm muting her.
Okay. So anyway, so it's very difficult, you know, to pull yourself out of that. It can be done, but the opposite to me of that avoidance death spiral is being in action, making decisions and feeling good that, hey, you know what, I'm doing the best that I can with the information that I have right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I was wondering, so you're talking about what you know versus how you behave. So that's the first one, and that emotion shouldn't drive your decision making. Also, being actionable or being decisive.
Mm-hmm.
Get out of the death trap.
Yes.
And do you have tips for how to get out of the death trap?
I think a big part is just starting with the tiniest action, right? Instead of looking at the whole big scenario and going, oh my gosh, how am I going to solve all these problems overnight? The answer is probably you're not, right? It's going to take a while, just like any major, whether it's your health, again, a relationship, a professional situation, it might take multiple steps. And so the first thing is just awareness. And I think something that you said earlier, which is, okay, this is where I was, and this is where I am, and this is where I want to be. So getting into that right mindset and absolving yourself and saying, you know what? Yeah, maybe I messed up, but that's okay. I'm here now and I'm getting in the right frame of mind to move forward. So it's actually not financial. It's really about getting below the surface and giving yourself permission to say, that's not me anymore. That's not my story. That's not my past. I'm here now. I can't go backwards. I can only move forward. So then the next step is to shine a very bright light on the situation and just be brutally honest, right? And take inventory of what you have working for you and as well as what your challenges are. I think a lot of times when we're down, we forget about what assets we have on our side, and not just the financial assets, but I was having a conversation earlier with someone, we were talking about your network being an asset. And sometimes I think when we're really down and we feel like we've made all these missteps, we only focus on all the things that have gone wrong, and we totally forget to give ourselves credit for, things that we may have done right or that we have working for us.
It seems to me that it's abundantly clear why you put so much emphasis on building a relationship with your clients, because if you really have to have these conversations that are emotionally driven for people, or that maybe that they're emotionally avoiding them, it's critical that they have a relationship with you, that they feel you're approachable, that you can give them the time to listen to what their anxieties are, and give them permission to speak that, because I don't think you can move forward if you're not first heard.
Oh my gosh, exactly. And unfortunately, there's a lot of shaming in our industry. And I think also that's changing as there are more women, more minorities, different voices, different, younger advisors, just more diversity in general, and not just this typical old boys club where, well, you do it this way, or, what are you thinking? That is kind of phasing out. And I feel like I'm hopeful for our industry, because I feel like our industry has a certain reputation for not being so kind and compassionate. So, I'm trying to change that for my clients. But I do feel like there are other advisors out there who share a similar approach. And that is that, shaming gets you nowhere. Shaming does not help anyone. It's not motivating. It's not going to help you get from A to B. So, skip it.
So how important is all the volunteer work you do in our community? How important is that to communicating your interest in building relationships, not only in the community through your volunteer work, but how does that translate to letting people know that as clients, they would get that same sort of support from you?
Yeah, it's funny. I recently had a new client coming on board, and they were asking about the volunteer activity that I do. And it's funny, I think they weren't necessarily particular about what kind of work I was doing, but to them, it just signaled that, okay, she's rooted in the community. She's not going anywhere. She's not going to uproot and leave for Dallas or, Key West or whatever. She's really connected to the community, because if you take the time to meet with a financial advisor, you're stripping yourself down, and you're sharing parts of yourself that probably no one else, maybe other than your spouse, knows about you. It's very, very, very personal and very, very sensitive. And so you don't want to have to start that process again because someone is going to be moving or retiring. You want to know that they're going to be around. So yes, I mean, of course, it's important to me to volunteer and to return favors to the community and to support where I can. But I think it also just shows clients that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
So clients who have successfully navigated their finances and they're looking to maybe plan for the future, do you do estate planning as well?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'm a certified financial planner practitioner. So as part of the onboarding process, when a client comes on board, we take an inventory of not just their financial, assets, liabilities, cash flow, income, all that good stuff, but also, do they have documents in place? Have they done planning? What type of insurance do they have? what are the main relationships in their life, whether it's children, other family members that they might be responsible for, right? Professional goals, et cetera. And we do a whole kind of 360. I am not an attorney, so I do not actually draft documents, but I can spot if there might be an issue, right? So if it's your second marriage, right off the bat, there's going to be a couple conversation points to say, okay, Bernadette, tell me about your estate planning documents. How do you provide for, your children from your first relationship in these documents? And so we can have a conversation, and although I won't be able to do your actual documents for you, I can give you a framework so that when you do go to see your attorney, you already have a good understanding of maybe what you want to accomplish. You can be prepared and then go into that meeting, as opposed to just leaving the meeting going, no, what did we just talk about? I'm not quite sure.
Right.
So overwhelming, right? So just making that time with your other advisors more efficient.
Do you do, just because you're so global in your support of your clients, do you also help people do like end of life documents? Do you support those efforts?
So that's usually part of that whole kit that they'll do with their estate planning attorney. I'm very a big advocate on making sure that clients do have their documents, whether they're 22 or 82. I want all clients to have some type of documentation in place, because if there's one thing we know about life, it's to expect the unexpected. And even more so than the wills, it's the power of attorney documents that can be a total nightmare if you don't have them in place and have some type of unexpected health event. And it's just something that a lot of people don't think about. And especially if you think, well, I don't really have a lot of assets right now, so I don't need to do estate planning. That's a big, big misconception. You need to do estate planning whether or not you have assets. You could be a new mom with 4 kids and not a lot of assets, but if anything happens to you and your spouse, right now, if there's no documentation on who's going to be the guardian or custodian of the children, and any proceeds, life insurance, et cetera, it's just messy. It just can get very, very messy. And again, at a time where people are already highly emotionally charged and don't need all these extra hoops that they have to jump through.
So it's sort of a gift that you would give to your loved ones to be prepared. In the sense that I'm taking care of this now, so if I'm not here, you don't have to deal with this.
There's a big difference. I mean, I've seen it firsthand where, if you're a client and you're caring for elderly parents and they've already kind of consolidated accounts and they've got all their documents in order, it's still a lot of work and it's still very exhausting, but it's much, much easier than the person who their parents have been DIYing all these years and they've got 8 accounts at 8 different institutions and no cohesive plan. Documents are outdated, beneficiary designations are different on 401k and the 3 IRAs that they have. It's night and day.
Right. All right. Well, Karen, we've been talking for about an hour, and I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to tell us about your business. And then I wanted, after you do that, I have one last fun question for you. I'm warning you.
One other point I was just going to make is about avoiding comparison. I think, with healthy or with clients, like we talked about, having a healthy mindset, part of that is that they're able to avoid comparing themselves to others. And this comes in a lot of different ways in our daily lives, right? We're all flooded with these images of like the perfect meal, the perfect house, the perfect beach body, the perfect relationship on social media, right? Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. And then, financially, we think, oh, well, I'm here, I should be here because, this is how other people in my peer group are doing it. Successful investors have a way of tuning out that noise, knowing what's really important to them. And if they're tracking to their goals and their personal benchmark, they're good with that. They don't get caught up in all that other noise and those other images. It's really hard to do, but I think that is one really key attribute of being successful.
And it sounds like it's one of the most important, right? If you can't stay focused on what matters to you, you kind of go willy-nilly wherever you think everybody else is, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, I wanted to mention, you were talking about estate planning and assets. One thing we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks, there's an attorney who has for most of her career focused on estate planning and helping people distribute their assets. She now is teaching estate planners and financial planners about legacy letters, and it's helping people to create a legacy for their emotional content. And she's going to be joining us for Primetime for Women, talking about the importance of planning that emotional content and how you're going to pass that down to the next generation. So I just, when you were talking about that, it made me think I wanted to say that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that's a different way of being relational, I think, but incredibly important. So Karen, I wanted to end with, if you have a favorite quote, either about financial well-being or finance, or just a personal favorite quote that you would share with us.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I actually, let me see, because I don't want to mess it up.
You're going to do Yoda again?
I know. I'm totally drawing a blank on that, but there's one with the psychologist or psychiatrist, Carl Jung, that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. I think that's so appropriate in our lives and also in our financial lives, because there is so much happening very often subconsciously that we might not even be aware of. And if we don't call attention to whatever is happening, we're bound to make, you know, those same mistakes or repeat those bad habits over again. So
that's great, great quote, and I think important advice to live by. So I just want to thank you for joining us, and for our guests, for our attendees that joined us. This will be posted on Primetime for Women's new website under videos, and we encourage people to take a look at what Karen has shared here tonight. It can improve your life, and she's there to help you and support you. Karen, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
sure thing. Thank you, Bernadette. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Take care. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Cheers.